Hey everyone, I'm Josh. Welcome back to my channel. Today on Friday Reads, I'm going to be talking about some brand new books that I've been reading. This week I've been reading 4 different e-arcs, 3 of which are brand new. I think 2 of them were published like on the 12th. Another one is going to be published on the 26th. More on that one at the end because I'm still reading it. But the 2 that I actually finished were first going to be The Ruthless Lady's Guide to Wizardry by C.M. Waggoner. And this is a historical fiction fantasy romance book that is set in a fictional world where you have wizards, women who are wizards, who can do magic. It seems where each of them have their own particular power, kind of like X-Men. And I have a lot of mixed feelings on this book for so many reasons. So the writing is something I actually like. I like the author's writing style. I liked how she presented the story. I was able to enjoy the writing itself. And then the characters I actually kind of liked as well. Our main character is this sort of problematic wizard lady who tends to be a bit of a scam artist. She's not a villain by any stretch of the imagination, but you know, she's this sort of caricature of a character who does bad things. She's a lowlife. She's no good. She's a street rat, to quote Aladdin. She meets this wealthy woman who is sort of upper class woman who she's trying to basically trick into marrying her because she needs money. And then that sort of evolves. But the story itself is focusing on these women who are hired by this wealthy lady who needs protection. And then at some point the story morphs into these detective ladies, to these wizard ladies, becoming sort of detectives, hunting down a murderer. And I'm not quite sure how we went from A to B, because honestly, I wasn't invested in the plot at all. This book I ended up giving 3.5 stars out of 5 because it wasn't completely mediocre. Like, I really liked the author's writing, and I really liked our characters, and I even liked our romance between these 2 women. But I just, the main plot just seemed like I didn't care at all. Found it hard to pay attention to, and as it's apparent, I clearly did not get much out of the main plot. It just felt sort of generic. First off, our main character is kind of generic in the sense that we have this heroine who is very problematic, who does a lot of bad things. She's not a great person, but she's going to learn and grow. And then of course you have this group of people who have to protect. The storyline just seemed very simplistic, and I wasn't that interested in it to begin with. I wasn't interested in the character arc of our main character, even if I liked her as a person, as a character. I felt like just wasn't enough was done with her, and that in the end it just felt sort of two-dimensional in how she was framed. It's like a oxymoron to say I like her but also don't like what was done with her. Then there's the problem of this being a historical fantasy. Like, where in the hell was this actually set? It is an alternative world where magic is real and people know it's real, and it sort of influences the society. But the dialect wasn't quite Victorian, but at times it was Victorian, and other times it was modern. More often than not, it felt modern. So I'm not sure where the historical aspects was to fit in. It just seems like it was a convenient setting or convenient word to tack onto the story, when realistically it's just an alternate world where things are pretty much like today, with slightly older time type scenarios or things happening as well. Maybe some of the people dynamics are somewhat that way. It was very classist. Like, you have these people, our main character who's like from the gutter, and she's like a low life, and she's interacting with these rich people, and there's that very, you know, kind of a caricature again when you have these just 2 societies, the rich and the poor, and it didn't seem very nuanced, or at least I didn't see much nuance in there. Altogether, just the world building and the plotting made the book just not work for me, and which is disappointing because I was actually really excited. This queer romance, fantasy, women empowerment, I was really there for it. And I may or may not try this author again, because I did, like I said, like her writing. And to me, that's, I think, like fundamental to me liking a book is needing to like the writing. But in the end, it just wasn't for me. Maybe you'll like it more. I don't think this book was like overtly bad in the plotting. It just wasn't something I was interested in. That's that. This was published on the 12th, I think, or 13th of January. So it's a brand new release. Then I started or read Detransition Baby by Torrey Peters, I think. Yes, Torrey Peters. In this book, oh, I love this book. Let's go ahead and say that now. This book is probably my favorite book that I've read all year, all month. And it's only been like 20 days, but who cares? This book is a story about, what is it about? It is not very plot driven. It's very character focused, but it's about these 2 trans women, or a trans woman who is very problematic, and her ex-girlfriend who is now detransitioned. So you have these two trans women who were together, but the story starts where they're not together anymore, and her ex-girlfriend has detransitioned back into a man, and this man then gets involved with a cis woman and gets her pregnant. Then there is some like really weird interminglement of their relationship, or like where the three of them just start getting into this really complex, weird dynamic. And I don't want to go any more deeper than that because of the fact that I feel like it's just a big part of this. It's just digging into the weirdness of it and really just looking at it from a really witty and I guess really interesting way. The story, like the premise of the story, like it all feels very, very out there. But at the same time, I say that as a cis man. And I think the story is in a lot of ways supposed to give an appreciation for the difficulty of what it's like to be a trans woman, how it is to survive. And the story itself, first off, the writing is spectacular. I love the writing. I immediately realized that I was going to love this story from the get-go. I love a story that can do that. I could tell it was 5-star material from the start. Those are the best kind of books. Obviously, we all want that. And then we have the characters who I felt were really nuanced. Like they were very flawed, but they were also likable in some ways. Like just very complicated. And then the way the characters just interacted, like it all went in directions I wasn't expecting. Let me try and formulate myself a bit clearer here, because I'm not being very sensible here. The story itself is really a character analysis of all these characters, primarily the two trans women, but also some analysis of the cis woman as well. And it's important to recognize that every character in here is very flawed, and that's a big part of the story. But at the same time, the story itself, like the main plot that I told you around, we had this current time where this detransitioned trans woman has gotten a cis woman pregnant, and then it causes this weird intertanglement of the three. Like this is the central plot, but the bulk of the story, like this isn't the right book, the bulk of the story itself is really in the form of flashbacks that tie into the now to give us perspective on our characters and where their minds are and how they got there. And I could see this book being polarizing because of all the flashbacks, maybe being confusing to some, but also because it's not very plot driven. But at the same time, if you love characters and if you love just getting a deep analysis of characters, I think this story works really well. It was a clear journey that I made in this story, that we have in this story, that is extremely satisfying in a lot of ways. Now, I will say the ending, I didn't love the ending. Like, it wasn't satisfying, but I will say it was fitting. Does that make sense? It's still 5-star, still my favorite book of the month, of the year so far. But I really wanted the ending to go a different direction, but at the same time, I feel like it went in a fitting, maybe you might say realistic direction. But the book is just really weird. Like, it reminds me in some ways of Luster, in the sense that you had this really weird relationship dynamic. It's actually, I think, a next level when it comes to this like non-traditional way of looking at relationships, which is really interesting. But then you intertangle in there this really complex web of trans issues, trans identity, and queerness. And then add on the layer of beautiful writing and witty writing, and it's just so good. It's so fucking good. I love this book. I highly recommend this to anyone and everyone. Please give it a try. This book is so good. Detransition Baby by Torrey Peters. After I started that book, or maybe just before, I also started reading my E-Arc of Gutter Child by Jael Richardson. Now this one, unlike the other two, was not published on the 12th. It was in fact to be published on the 26th. I have an E-Arc, which is what I started reading. I don't know how I get this. I mean, I do know. Obviously, I bought it. I bought it at my local bookstore, and they sent me an email and said, yo, it's in, come get it. And I did. And I didn't stop to think to myself, this doesn't get published until like next Monday or next Tuesday. Now I have it. So I can only assume that they made a mistake and didn't realize they weren't supposed to give it out yet, even though they received it early. But luckily it evens out because I already have the ebook copy, like the e-arc of it. Right now, I'm only 15% into this. I am confident in my abilities to finish it this weekend, but I also think I have enough here to say for sure that I think I'm going to love this book. My feelings here are very analogous to Detransition Baby, in the sense that these first 45 pages that I've read give me 5-star material vibes, and I'm really excited to dig into it, largely because I thought this was going to be a contemporary novel. Never actually looked up the synopsis. It turns out this is more of an alternate world type dystopian type story. And this, like the Ladies Wizardry or whatever, looks at a class system, but I think it does so, or at least it seems to be doing so, in a much more nuanced way. It seems to be having a world that basically is analyzing sort of indentured servitude or slavery, but also with an added layer of almost indigenous issues as well, because our characters in here, their issues are mirroring those or analogous to those of black people in the past, but also of indigenous people in the sense that we have these group of people who are separated. We have the gutter people who are part of a mainland that has been colonized by the upper class people. And at some point after the colonization, the gutter people, they basically fought back. They realized they were not getting a good deal here. They were being abused. And in that process, a lot of people died. And then there was this debt that was set upon the other people, the indigenous population of this land. And now every person, every child has to basically pay off their debt by indentured servitude in order to be free, quote unquote free. Because even when they are free, there is still a serious amount of discrimination and hatred in this society. So we see multiple layers in this book, and I can't say how nuanced it's going to be long term, but what I will say is that it was extremely provocative, and I am extremely excited to be digging into this because I think it seems to have the making of a fantastic, amazing story. And that's the basic synopsis. I'll leave it at that. I will also say that the first 45 pages also told me that I do like her writing. This isn't on audio, obviously. If it was, it's too early for me to listen to the audiobook, but I am reading it along with text-to-speech reader on my Kindle, and it's actually fairly easy to do. I'm confident I'm going to finish it this weekend. I would have probably finished it sooner because of how much I was liking it if it wasn't for the fact that I really fell in love with Detransition Baby, and it's just easier to pick up an audiobook than just to sit down and read, even if I was listening to a text-to-speech while reading this. But I will say that this comes out next week, I think, 26th. Jael Richardson, this is her debut novel. She had a memoir before this. I think it's going to be amazing. I'm really excited to get into this, to finish this, and I think this is a book probably worth reading. Jael Richardson is a Canadian author. She is the head of a organization, I forget the name of it, I'll put it here, but she created this, I believe it was, and I found her in relation to Canada Reads, which was like this yearly competition where they try to pick the best book every Canadian should read, and she was having discussions with relation to that. Then I heard her promote her new book, and I figured I'd just give it a try. I will say that I was very hesitant coming into this because I really had no idea what I was getting into when I decided to pick it up. I picked it up to support her because I liked her. At least I liked what I had seen from her. Then I went in blind, and the level of excitement I had when I realized I was going to love this book is just like through the roof. So I'm very excited to be digging into this. Also, I want to make one more thing. The pages in this book, I don't know, they smell better than your average novel. I don't know why, but they smell great. They smell amazing. And finally, another book that I am in the process of reading, my anti-racist book of the month, is Indigenous Rights. This book is under 300 pages long, but the audiobook is actually 16 hours long. That's a bit of a dichotomy. I'm not sure how that is. They are reading all of the notes and like endnotes and everything like that, so that maybe that's making it longer. Either case, it's intriguing. It is very dense, but I think it's going to be very beneficial. So far, it's been very beneficial of a read. This is essentially a book that deals with Indigenous issues. This is a deep dive into Indigenous issues, and I do think this is intended for, maybe I'm wrong, for non-Indigenous populations because it is, at least in the beginning, I'm only maybe 15% into it. It's digging heavily into some basic ideas, basic concepts to really ensure or help the reader get a better appreciation for Indigenous issues and to better understand them as Indigenous peoples. For example, they're analyzing how law related to Indigenous people have been basically used to abuse them in various ways. And this book is in relation to Canadian population. So those are all the things that I've been reading. These are all arcs. It's been a good month for arcs. Now I have to sit down and actually write down my reviews so I could improve my NetGalley score. But also, there have been some pretty good reads. It's always nice to get a fantastic read from NetGalley. I never know what to expect there because, you know, you don't have the same background of feedback from general readers to get an idea of how you're going to like it or not. So I have to go in blind, and it's kind of a hit or miss sometimes. And I'm always so excited and pleased when it's a nice hit. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something from it. Let me know if you're going to check out any of these books, particularly Detransition Baby or Gutter Child. And as always, hope you have a great weekend, a great day. and goodbye.